you tell the story, the video, the end is just the beginning. You tell the story of one day when Jesse came to you and said, Jonathan's gonna run away. And you tell us what happened.
Jonathan's 6 years old, and you need to pray for the young man. He's a wonderful young man following in his father's footsteps, just finishing his master's in psych ed, and is married now. But when he was only 6 years old, his older brother Jesse is 8, and it was probably only maybe 6 or 7 months after Mom died. And Jonathan internalizes by nature. He keeps things in, and Jonathan really didn't cry much. If you remember, Jesse ran out crying right away, immediately, and Jonathan, bless his heart, kept things inside. And one day, as a good older brother, Jesse's watching out for Jonathan, and Jesse, it's bedtime, and Jesse comes and squeals on his brother. I'm glad he knows when to squeal and break confidence. And it was just, Dad, Jonathan says he's going to run away from home. And I'm like, oh my goodness. And my heart's breaking, and that is so unlike Jonathan, because he's this happy kid. And so I go to his bedroom, and I'm sitting there alone, and he's lying down in bed, ready for bed. I said, so Jonathan, Jesse tells me you're going to run away from home. And he looks up to me and he goes, yep. And I know what he's really doing is he's saying, I need to run away from this pain. I don't know what to do. Children don't know what to do. My goodness, adults don't know what to do. So it makes sense. And Jonathan, he says, yep, I'm going to run away from home. And I'm like inside praying while I'm saying, God, what do I say to this kid? And it came into my mind, and I'm so grateful. And I said, Jonathan, can I come too? And he goes, yep, right away. And he says, and Jesse and Sarah and Rebecca too. And it was a classic moment of where we were all, he was saying it for all of us. How do we run away from this nightmare? I don't want my life like it is. And so we creatively sat there for the next hour, and we planned our escape. And obviously we can't change our life, but we sat there and we began to plan a camping trip where we would go away as a family, and that allowed him to sleep that night.
Wow. What do children need who lose a loved one? We've been talking about Jonathan and his, as you said, just wanting to run away from the pain, and we all identify with that. What do children need?
Well, children are, the challenge with children, Paul, is complicated in that their comprehension is limited. They think in concrete forms, and that's why cartoons are very concrete. There's a villain and there's a hero. And so the challenge is, how do you talk about a very complicated thing with someone who thinks in concrete forms? I remember giving an example is about a week after Sarah's only 2.5 years old, and trying to explain, and so every night she's crying for Mom, and I'm lying in the bed with her, trying to put her to sleep, and she says, well, Dad, it's time. And I go, what do you mean? It's time. And it's time to go get Mom. And I realized that I and probably a lot of grandma and everyone else had said, when she says, where's Mom? I want Mommy. She's in heaven. Well, her idea was heaven was like she's in Ottawa. I mean, it's time, let's get in the car and go get her. She's been gone long enough. I want Mommy. And so grief, it affects them in their developmental stages, depending on what stages they're in. And like all of us, if we are wounded in our various developmental stages, we can, if it's not processed well, we can get stuck or stinted in some of those absolute critical places for them to develop well and normally and healthy. And so it is absolutely important, as Dr. Cadman, our pediatrician who is on staff with us and so capably in the video talks about children, and it's so important that we check out what their understanding of death is before we just give them answers. And and then go from there. And so often with our play therapist and the various people that are skilled in working with the younger kids in their traumas, it is really critical that we enter their world, not that we demand that they somehow have a comprehension to enter ours, because it is even more traumatic when there's no understanding of what death is and what death isn't. And so obviously, Paul, whenever we're talking about children, to thrive need security. And whenever the significant parent or loved one or issue or person in their body is ripped out of their life, especially in our situation with sudden death, it creates a wave of insecurity, fears, and worrying. And for Jonathan, it was internalized, it went inside. Others will begin to act out and become angry and do some other things. And so working and so we went to, I brought my kids very quickly on to groups for children, and working with others that are going through, and often their work is play. And so for children, play is their work. And so you need to enter into that area, and that's why we have play therapy and those things, Paul. Wow. But the other part of that, Paul, was I remember coming to I'm so grateful to God, because when you're grieving, there's so much compromise of concentration and thinking clearly and connecting dots. Your mind is just going all over the place, and you can't organize very well. Your memory is compromised, different things. But I remember shortly after the funeral and praying to God and saying, I only have 2 hands. God, how am I going to hold 4? And I need help. And I recognized that my attitude had to change, and I decided that my kids and I will have issues. But what's new? That I had to accept this. It was a decision that was going to take a process, but I had to say it is okay for them to have issues, because all of us have issues. And this will be one of theirs. And so what do we do about it? Let's get on the road, let's solve the issues, let's work on it, let's face this thing rather than deny it, run away from it. And so I have told my kids, as teenagers, as approaching marriage, I tell them, I said, you know, this cannot not affect you. And however, if you face it, and with God's help, this can be your greatest strength.